Hi everyone, welcome to Atlassian's Voice to the Customer. This month we're going to be looking and talking to Replicate Technologies and looking at how Replicate use Atlassian tools in an Agile environment. Oren Teich is going to be presenting from Replicate. This session will be getting recorded as well. Just so you know, if you need to jump out early or anything like that, we'll be recording the session and publishing it to the Atlassian TV archives. And you'll be able to view this and a lot of our previous Voice of the Customer sessions as well there. We've been running this for about 6 months or so now. So there's a few there to check out if you want. My name's Ben Nasker. I look after some of the marketing aspects here at Atlassian. And let me jump over and introduce Oren. Oren's not far away from us, actually. We're talking out of sort of the Silicon Valley area. I'm located in San Francisco, and Oren's just south of me, not far. And Oren's currently the VP of Product Management at Replicate Technologies, self-proclaimed products guy, according to his LinkedIn profile. He's been in the space of product management for quite some time now, trying to work to solve IT infrastructure problems at Replicate, as well as previously at Sun Microsystems, Cobalt, and Monte Vista. Oren's got a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and he's into photography and biking. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Oren and let him tell you all about how he uses Atlassian tools in an Agile context. Oren, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. So let's get my screen sharing and go. So for those of you wondering, that photo of me is coming up on a decade old. It's maybe time for me to get a new one of those. I just like that one. I hate getting older. No, but what I wanted to talk about today was particularly Agile, and I'm going to start and give a little description of what Agile methodology is and how that works in a development environment, talk about some of the benefits, and then really get into the process and the tools for it. And I want to talk a lot about our personal experience here. So Replicate is a relatively small company. We've only been around for a year now. We've had our product, first product into the market for 4 months now. And when I came on board a year ago, when we first got started, we were very interested in seeing how we could get a product out to market as quickly as possible, how to be very responsive to customer needs. And so I've had previous experience doing a lot of Agile development at my previous jobs, and this seemed like the perfect fit. And when we did it, we set out and wound up using a suite of tools. So I want to walk you through our own process and how we decided on what we were going to do here. I'm going to go back and forth between slides and a demo. For those of you who are live, let us know about any questions you have. We'll have at the end. And for those of you who are viewing this recorded, you'll get my contact information at the end, and please feel free to get in touch with me. So I think the first place we need to start is coming all the way back to the beginning about software development and say, what is the ultimate goal? What are we trying to do? And we have to realize is we're trying to build a product as developers, as product management, as any product-focused company. We're trying to build a product that succeeds in the marketplace. And success has a number of different criteria. It can mean how many copies do you sell? It can mean, do you hit the expectations? Do you set the right customer expectations? And I think, as we've all personally known, the reality is companies are miserable at setting expectations. It's actually truly shocking just how bad it is. And schedules aren't realistic is probably the #1 issue. I think it is past a cliche joke at this point to make fun of Microsoft for delaying their schedules, but they're far from the other one. I mean, just as an example, I did a Google search and I looked for Windows release delayed, and I got almost 300,000 hits, which is depressing in and of itself. And then I even looked for some other people. And basically, software always comes late. Windows Mobile, Firefox, IBM, Sun, you name it, software's late. And further, it almost always isn't right. You come out with a product and it turns out, wait, this isn't exactly what I wanted. This isn't the features that I was expecting. And there's this real disconnect. And this about 25 years ago, some people were looking at this, and the traditional way of doing software development has always been you write big software spec, you have a set of product managers usually whose job it is to go and talk to customers and then somehow distill all of that gained knowledge into a spec. And you'd go and write a multi-100-page spec, which you would then hand off to engineering, and engineering would come back and say, well, we can do this and this and this, and you'd negotiate, and then you'd come up with, write requirements, and then engineering, and you negotiate, and you come up with a spec, and you then implement tightly to that spec, which sounds great, but has a number of assumptions. It assumes that you know what you're getting into. It assumes that the customer's not going to change their mind, the market's not going to change. It assumes that you can actually define up front things that are fundamentally unknowable. And really, none of this is true. And so starting about 25 years ago, a new development approach was come up. And the basic concept is we need to go on reality. There is no way of knowing in advance that this is going to take exactly 6 months, that this piece of componentry doesn't depend on that piece of componentry, or that implementing feature X, we're all talking about Atlassian here, so let's pick on them. I don't know, implementing some particular email-based reporting when someone files a bug is actually going to generate incremental sales, or is what the customer actually cares about. And so fundamentally what Agile about, as you can imagine based on the name, Agile is about being agile, responding to the customer inputs. It's about observing the real behavior and responding. Now, there's all sorts of different Agile processes. There's more than I actually can care to shake a stick at. One that I in particular have adopted over the years and find very successful is called Scrum. And Scrum, the basic idea is kind of like a rugby scrum. Everyone gets together, and on a regular basis, you sync and you check what's going on. So what I have here is a picture, a diagram of the Scrum process. And this Scrum process is one that you can see actually taken from Mountain Goat Software, which is a great resource for anyone who's interested in finding out more about this. I'd strongly recommend you go to their website. And if we take a look here, we can see there's 4 major components involved in any Scrum iteration. And so the way this works is the first step is you have a product backlog. And the product backlog is the collection of, you can think of it as requirements, though generally instead of doing this as formal requirements, the user shall, the system must, instead of doing this as formal requirements, you do something called user stories. The point is these are placeholders for conversation. Instead of trying to outline 100% of the features and functionality I want to have, I'm going to put into here a list of, as a user, I can log into the system, or I can change my password, or as a replicate salesperson, I have the ability to demo instantly the product. So you put in a series of easy to describe user stories, and you prioritize them. So the goal is the backlog should always be prioritized. And when I say prioritized, I mean stack ranked. So something that's above something else is more important than what's below it. There's no, oh, well, this must be P1, this has to get done, because we all have fallen into that problem where the next thing you know, you have 6 years worth of P1 bugs in 6 months to do it, and it's never going to happen. It's kind of, I think, engineering's bane with product management in general. This we forced to have a priority. And that means that when we then say, well, we only have 6 months, for example, to get something done, we can look at what can we get done in 6 months from the top. And it's very clear because everything's always prioritized. Now, once you have an idea of what you're trying to get done over the entire life of the product, and of course you're constantly putting more and more into the backlog, what you want to do is you need to break this down into chunks. And with Scrum, the idea is you go through a sprint or an iteration. Those terms you might hear, they're interchangeable. And a sprint or an iteration is generally, as you can see in this picture, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the organization, the size, the complexity, what's going on. That's really what's been found to work the best, 2 to 4 weeks. Here at Replicate, we do a 2-week iteration. And when you're doing a 2-week sprint, you need to get a little bit finer granularity. Let's say, for example, that you decide you're going to work on I'll use a real-world example from us. As a Replicate Data Center Analyzer user, I want to be able to deploy this in less than 30 minutes. Well, that's a great user story, but it's not nearly enough detail to implement. So the next step is, as a team, all together, the developers, product management, we break this down into a set of tasks we need to accomplish. That's the backlog. So this is going to be the more specific. Okay, well, we need to put in a user interface. We need to put in a provision. We need to interface with the VMware engine. We need to bing, bing, bang. And we come up with a list of, generally speaking, 1-day-long tasks, one person, 1-man-day-long tasks. And that becomes the backlog. That then is what we've agreed to as a team to work on for the next 2 weeks. And then once a day, we have our Scrum meeting where we all get together and we say, hey, how are things going? what did we accomplish yesterday? What are we going to accomplish today? What's blocking us? And we all get in sync with each other and know what's going to go on. Finally, the last piece, of course, is we don't just do this for the fun of it. We're not just doing this because we think, hey, this is great. The goal is at the end of every iteration, at the end of every 2-week iteration, we want to have something that's potentially shippable. The key word here being potentially shippable. This doesn't mean we're going to ship it, but this does mean that what we have should be shippable in a theoretical world. Now, we may decide, oh, maybe we didn't hit this quite right. Maybe the customer doesn't care yet and we need to add more features, but we always want to have a potentially shippable thing, which means we need to have a built artifact. Now, each of these has their own set of challenges and their own process, but this fundamental process, you can see it's very simple, really only 4 major steps. It's obviously there's a lot of complexity. If you're really interested in implementing it, like I said, Mountain Goat Software is a great place to start. There's a lot of other places, but the reality is that you can get started on this immediately, that the tools you're trying to use just don't matter. Now, I know you dialed into this, you're phoned in and you're listening to theoretically a shill for a tools vendor. I really want to stress that this is a process, and just like anything, the tools you use don't make the process. If you don't have the right process in place, you can have the best tools in the world, which, as you'll find out, I happen to think Atlassians are. But you can have the best tools in the world. If you don't get the process, it's not going to matter. You're not going to get anywhere with this. By the same token, you don't need any tools whatsoever. You can be doing this literally with paper. And in fact, this is a picture of a typical starting point where you write down your user stories on sticky notes. You move them around on the board to see what's going on during your iteration and your scrums, and everyone has a quick view. I actually might even recommend, for those of you getting started, to use this, because the reality is this is more than adequate for a lot of people, especially as you're getting started. In fact, this is great for us. This worked out well. So I really can't stress enough that you got to walk before you run. And when you're looking at making a big change, like adopting an agile process such as Scrum, the last thing you want to do is try and jump in and change everything. You want to make sure you get the fundamentals down. Now, once you've got to the fundamentals, you realize that while tools don't matter, eventually they do. We certainly ran into this situation where paper works great until you reach a certain scale. At some point, the amount of stickies kind of makes you cry. Especially when I was at Sun, there were 200 plus developers working across 6 different scrums that were all reporting in together. Paper across 4 different geographic locations. Paper obviously wouldn't have worked there. Geographic location being another one, or time shifting. More and more these days, even if you're physically co-located, you might have people who work at 10 o'clock at night or at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so all of a sudden, what you start to realize is you need some of that cohesion that, frankly, software is so great at bringing. So what I want to stress here is I'm going to show you some great stuff, and it is cool. It's totally changed how we worked. If you're really looking at getting into Scrum, make sure you understand the methodology first. And then once you've got the methodology, then you can look at the right tools. The tools that are out there, though, really do make a huge difference, and especially as you start to get more advanced, I'm a huge fan of it. There's some of the philosophical debate. Some people argue you never want to use tools for this, but I'm a believer. Having used tools now for the past 3 years and having used almost all on the market, when I came to Replicate, I wound up doing an evaluation of everything that's around and available, and really found that I was impressed with the quality of the tools that came out of Atlassian. So next, what I want to do is actually walk you through this life cycle. So coming back to this Scrum life cycle, and if we take a look at each of these individual boxes, I want to talk to you about the set of tools that I'm using and how that works into the Atlassian workflow. So the first place let's start is with the backlog. So for the backlog, what I'm doing is I'm using 2 particular tools from Atlassian. The 2 most common, this should be no surprise to anyone. Now, the first is something called Confluence. Confluence is their wiki, and that's where I'm taking the customer input. The second is Jira. That's the bug tracking, which I'm using actually for user story tracking, and this is where we do all of our prioritization. So instead of just talking to it, and I'm missing here is I'm using the Greenhopper plugin. I forgot the logo for that. That's too bad. Sorry guys, I didn't mean that. So, and I'm using the Greenhopper plugin. So let's actually show you a demo of this. So here we go. This is our wiki. This is a standard Confluence-based installation. You can see what we've got here. And one of the things we do is anytime any of us in the company talk to a customer, we come here and we create a customer page. So just as an example, you can see here Clark Consulting. We can see we've had multiple meetings with them, and here is one particular meeting we had actually coming up on a year ago now. So looking at this meeting, what we've done is we've just typed up all of our notes. And whenever we saw in the customer, whenever the customer asked for a particular feature, so for example, here, so we have a report and it's indicating something, and the customer actually said, can we actually do this instead? What we wind up doing is we create an issue in Jira. So one of the great things is Atlassian's done a really nice job of integrating across their suite of products. So here you can see we have a really nice macro. So we just have to, all we have to do is when we're typing into the wiki, and if you actually want to see, I can show you. When you're typing into the wiki, all you need to do is you have this little simple format where you type in the issue and then at Jira. And what that does is that automatically, as you can see, creates this nice link. And you can see here at the bottom of my screen, it's going to our Jira server. So if I now click on one of these, I don't know, which one should I click on? Let's go with this one. So now you can see we have our issue here, standard like in Jira, where we can even further see what external references, because of the trackbacks. So now let's say a developer hadn't been looking at the wiki, but had come here and reassigned this. And they're like, well, I don't quite understand what's going on here. They can instantly see, oh, well, here's the Confluence page. Click on it. And if our, oh, sorry, I changed the URL, so there's a little tweak here, but instantly go back to our Confluence page, if I type in the right URL, which I didn't, anyway, and go back to the wiki page and see what's going on. So there's this full requirements traceability available here. Now, you can also see there's a number of other things in here. So we have subtasks that we created. We have estimated amount of time that's involved, how much time is remaining. Instead of talking about that in this particular interface, what I want to show you is another plugin we installed on top of this. So I actually happen to have a window. So here's our Jira. This is our Jira instance. It's a totally standard Jira instance, except that one thing we've done is there's a plugin from a third-party company called Greenhopper. And Greenhopper, well, the plugin's called Greenhopper. The company's called Greenhopper. No, I have no idea where they came up with those names. But what these are specific, Greenhopper plugin is explicitly designed as a Agile plugin for Jira, and it really makes all the difference in the world. Sorry guys at Atlassian, but to be blunt, I don't think I could use Jira for Agile development without it. It's a very reasonably priced, and I can't recommend it strongly enough. So let me just walk you through a little bit of what's going on. So the first thing I mentioned is we need to have a backlog. So here, sure enough, is our backlog. And if I click on the backlog, here we can see all of the user stories. So what we can see is anything that's yellow is a user story. Anything that's pink is a bug. And one of the great things about this is I'm prioritizing user stories and bugs together, because the reality is a bug is just as important as a feature you add, and so you need to be able to say how relatively important it is. Now, I mentioned before, backlog is all about stack ranking. So that means that I am actually saying that this one up here, as a VC admin, I'd like to know right after probe deployment which probes were successfully deployed, which is probably meaningless to you guys, but hopefully meaningful to me. So this particular one is actually more important than I can see free space on all the data stores. Now, maybe I've started to get customer input, and this bug, for example, which I said was relatively down in the list, actually turns out to be a lot more important. Well, the beauty of what Greenhopper does is A, you get this really nice, easy interface, but B, you can even do stuff like this. That's it. I've just reordered it. This is now the most important piece. That's all that's involved. So you can see it's very, very simple. If I want to see further details on something, I can just double click on it and get this nice card view, or or I can click on the particular bug and get a window open in which I actually see the standard Jira interface. So this is a really great way of looking at things. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into some of the planning and how you go, but suffice to say there's a lot of things you want to know. So, for example, there's a concept of story points that you assign to a iteration to a user story, and the concept here is, as a team, you say basically, is this small, medium, or large? You know, I may not know that this is going to take me 70 hours worth of work, but I can tell you that this is one of the larger things we've looked at, or this looks relatively easy. And so the concept of story points is you assign a number to these user stories. And you can see then that, so for example, here we have a lot that we haven't done yet, but this is one that we have. We said this is 8 story points. that number is a meaningless number except in how it relates to other things. So we know that an 8 is smaller than a 20. Okay, got it. And we happen to be using the Fibonacci sequence here because I don't really care if something's an 8 or a 9. What I really want to know is the relative magnitude. So is it an 8 or a 13? So you can see here 3, 5, 8, 13, 20. Those are the numbers we're using. What that lets us then do is when we then actually come in and assign things to an iteration. So we have our backlog prioritized, and then we say, okay, this feature here, this particular one, we've decided this bug, well, here, let's put the bug back down. This particular user story is going to go into the next iteration. And so here, all I would need to do is drag this into the iteration. Now, this is the iteration we're currently working on, so I'm not going to modify the real iteration. But you can see here we have this nice release. So a sprint 1.3, so we are working on release 1.3, Mark 3. This means iteration 3. And you'll notice it's a child of release 1.3. So this is another thing that Greenhopper, the plugin, provides, is these hierarchical releases. So here you can see is I currently have 30 story points assigned to this release. And what this lets you do is say iteration over iteration, how am I doing? What's my flow look like? Am I getting better? Am I getting slower? So let's go to our iteration 1.3. Now, I mentioned before that it's not sufficient, if I just came in here and said I want to be able to, here, let's take one, this top one actually has a lot of tasks. If I just said I want to integrate a new probe wizard, A, that wouldn't be enough information for anyone, and B, I would have no idea what's involved in that. So what we did is, going back to that picture, we want to have a sprint backlog. And that's what we did here. We broke this down into tasks. So you can see here we have 16 tasks, and these are subtasks. So this is really, really easy to do. When you have a subtask, you just click that button. You can add a subtask. Hooray, this is a subtask. I can say that it's assigned to me. I think it's going to take 8 hours of work, and I'm going to create it. Oh, right. Sorry. We're doing an upgrade, and I can't create things right now. We put it into a mode that prevents us from doing that. So I'll ignore that for now. But what would happen was this would just show up right here. And so you can very quickly see that what you have is this very, very detailed list of exactly how many hours everyone thinks it's going to take and who owns each task. So now, going into the sprint, we can say, okay, we have 280 hours worth of work to get done in the sprint. That's going to cross this many people. That seems reasonable. This seems okay. We have a good, solid understanding of what's going on. Now, there is one other piece. Sometimes you actually need to go beyond just putting in tasks. Sometimes you actually need to do some design. This is all design, of course, and that's where we use another plugin as well. So I actually wanted to show you one other plugin. And here's Confluence. And so you can see in here we have our master plan for the 1.3 release. And so here's some UI mockups. So what we have in this piece is I'm showing you is our product is very heavily user interface based. We're doing everything with a web-based user interface. It's really important that we have a good graphical design. So here we're using a plugin called Balsamiq. And Balsamiq is a great Flash-based mockup creator. And you'll notice it creates these sketch-based mockups that are really great because they don't confuse our implementer, or it doesn't confuse my HTML developer who thinks, oh, I have to exactly match this. He understands this is a mockup. And that gives him the freedom to do the best implementation he can while conveying all the information. Now you can see these are integrated in here, and if I wanted to make a change, all I have to do is hit edit this mockup. We just have to wait for it to load. And for example, let's say I decided I wanted to add a breadcrumb. Well, all I have to do is change it, and here I could say this is home foo bar, and boom, sure enough, the breadcrumb shows up. Now let's say I said that was good, so I'll say mockup, save and close, added breadcrumb, hit save, and now that's automatically going to notify my developer that we have a change, and I wonder why it's not showing up. It's not showing up because the demo gods are playing with me. The way this works is it actually goes into it actually winds up going into here as attachments, and so it becomes very, very easy for you to see what's going on. So here you can see is the PNG, so I can email this around. You can see exactly what's going on here, and I actually know why it's not. We made some changes, so it's not auto-updating, but usually it does. So this becomes very, very easy to edit on the fly and collaboratively work together. So then, coming back to Jira, now my developer knows what it actually means to integrate the new probe wizard. He can go through and he can work on it. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. So that's what we're doing to manage the backlog. Now, actually, I went a little further and I even talked about the sprint backlog as well. So I got a little bit ahead of ourselves, but that's good because that'll leave me more time to talk about the daily Scrum meeting. So again, what happens here? This flow is we first have a prioritized backlog. That's what the product owner, the product management person does. We create from the product backlog the list of exactly what we're going to work on in each iteration. That's the sprint backlog. Then on a daily basis, we check and see how are people doing. That's what the daily Scrum meeting is. So for this part, for the daily Scrum meeting and the sprint backlog, this is all done in Jira with the Greenhopper plugin. So let's look at this daily Scrum meeting next. So for the daily Scrum meeting, there's this beautiful thing called the task board. And if we click on this task board, what you see is this looks very similar to that stickies I was showing you earlier. And that's really what this is. This is exactly that. This is a stickies interface. And sure enough, let's say, so for example, here's a task. Display grid and dialogue. It's part of this particular thing. So let's say this is assigned to me, and you can see we estimated that it's 4 hours worth of work. Let's say I'm going to start working on it. Well, all I have to do is click and drag. Well, I don't own it, so I can't do that. Here, let's just change it to me. All right, so now I own it, and now we can click and drag. Oh, right, we still put it back into read-only. Sorry, I forgot. We're in read-only mode right now. So it would be as simple as clicking and dragging to start working in progress. And you can see here's one in progress. Then, when you want to start marking that you have how much time you've done, what we can say is we can come here, we can click this little button, and we can say, all right, well, actually, before we do that, we can say, okay, we think there's an hour left. Well, you know what? I just spent 4 more hours on this. And I think, even though I spent 4 more hours on this, this is a doozy of one. It's going to take me 10 more hours. This probably won't work because it's in read-only mode. It might, though. Yeah, it didn't let me update it. But anyway, this would then let us track exactly what's going on and see. And then finally, when we're done with it, we can drag it to here and done. So this makes it very, very easy to track exactly what's going on. Now, you might ask, why are we tracking? I'm not tracking this so I can say, hey, Rich, you only worked 5 hours last week. That's not the point. I really couldn't care less how many hours Rich worked. The point is, how many hours do we have left and how are we tracking? So the next part of this is, after you make these updates every day, everyone's coming in here. And by the way, this is great because it lets us at a glance see, oh, wait, this still has some open issues. Look at this one. This one doesn't have any done. And then there's going to be some that are completely done. Oh, we really have that at a glance view of what's going on. Now, the next piece is, oh, demo gods are out to get me. So sorry. The next piece would be being able to show you burndown charts. And so what a burndown chart is it gives you a very nice graph showing you exactly how you're tracking where things are going. And so that burndown chart, the burndown chart lets you see at a glance, how are you doing? What's actually going on in your environment. So you get a very nice graph like you see here. You said, okay, I originally estimated we were going to have this much time. Oh, wait, we found there's more work that needs to be done. This isn't good. And oh, here we go, and we're making progress. And so you can very quickly see what's the shape of the graph look like. Are we going down? Are we going up? Is everything working the way you'd expect? And so this gives us, again, that at a glance. Because remember, Scrum and Agile, it's all about observation. It's all about responding to the reality of the situation. Let's say maybe we're here, it's going up and up, and we're like, uh-oh, this doesn't look good. Well, now we know when we maybe need to drop or change what's going on in this iteration, we need to pull some things out. And we can decide that as we need to, instead of 6 months later saying, oh, we're not on track to make this. So this lets us constantly evaluate where we are and how we're making progress. All right, let's go back. So the last piece of this I mentioned is, of course, having the shippable product increment. So it's great. You go through all this process, you're doing development, but if you don't get anything out of it, if you don't develop something, then it's all for naught. And so this requires another new concept. There's something called continuous integration. And the idea of continuous integration is every time you check in code, every time you make a task, what you want to be able to do is you want the system to automatically build and test it for you. Because if you don't automatically do this, if you have to do it manually, you're never going to do it. And so you want to be able to constantly, continuously build this. And then that way you know every 2 weeks what you have is in a good state. So for this potentially shippable product increment, what do you know? It turns out that Atlassian has another product that we use for this, and that's called Bamboo. So Bamboo is their build server. And, oops, let's go over to the build server we've got. I can close this. Here's the build server. So this is our replicate continuous integration server you can see here. And what you can see here is we have our list of builds that are going on. So for example, the trunk, and we can see that sure enough, the trunk, which we tried to build 4 hours ago, failed. So someone checked something in and it failed. And we can see that there was 3 out of 10 tests that failed specifically. We can also see here all these different builds, and here's our 1.3 build. This is the one we're actually currently working on giving out to customers, and this one succeeded. This one built successfully. Now, let me just open a particular build that I had bookmarked. So here's one that was successfully done, and you can actually see a bunch of really interesting stuff that's going on here. So the first is you can see that a developer triggered this, and you can actually see the changes. Now, where these changes coming from? This is actually coming from why do I want to say CVS? Oh my God, all of a sudden I become very old school. Subversion. This is actually coming from Subversion. So our build server is polling Subversion automatically, and whenever anyone checks something in, you can see we're on version 2987 of this file, it notices the change, it sees the Subversion commit change, and is automatically building it, and it can see who's made changes during that build. We can also see what tests we ran. So we have a series of automated tests that we're running, and you can see they run anywhere from 1 minute, or actually they run anywhere from 1 second, basically instantaneous, all the way up to a minute. And if we can actually even drill down into these tests, and we can see how long do they average take, when are they happening. We can even go down further and see this across builds and see where is this failing, where is this succeeding, when was it last built, when was it last run, what's going on, who broke it, who fixed it, what's going on. So this really gives us a huge amount of insight into how our build process is going, what's going on, how everything's coming together. And this is all integrated together again. So if we come back here to Jira, we can see here is the dashboard showing the build server, the build stuff, and even further, and this one I'm not going to be able to find off the top of my head because it can get a little tricky, when you make in Jira, when I close a particular issue, and it shows as being built successfully, it will show up in Bamboo, so you can look at a build, and like I said, this is most likely not going to this most likely isn't going to be able to easily find. You can see this issues. Yeah, there's no issues found in this particular one. But if this particular build had incorporated a fixed issue, it would be showing up here so I could then link it back to Jira. And remember, from Jira, we linked back to Confluence. And so I have that full requirements traceability where I can see from a built artifact what issues, what user stories this fixed, all the way back to who and what customers were requiring this. And so we can see that entire end-to-end matrix of what's going on. This, I was saying tools don't matter. I lied, actually. It is impossible to do any kind of agile methodology without a CI server. There's a number of them out there. Some are free, some are paid. We're using a paid one, which I'm not getting any discounts, so hopefully that tells you something. We really like the Bamboo server. It's great and easy to set up. You have, in my opinion, no choice. The only way to truly do a Scrum Agile methodology, is you need a CI server. You need to be continuously building and testing. And you can't do that manually. Trying to implement this yourself would be crazy. So using one of the CI servers out there is really critical. What this then does, sorry, just to close the loop, let's go back to that one I liked. So here's the build. So what this then does is it creates artifacts. So here you can see we happen to create 3 called the virtual appliances. These are things you deploy into VMware, and these are the artifacts that we create. So this is automatically being generated. This is our customer deliverable right here. There's nothing else we need to do. This is the customer deliverable. So now if I wanted to send this to a customer, all I have to do is click this link, and you can see over here now, it's busy downloading away. It's 350 megs, so it's going to take a little while. This is busy downloading away the customer artifact. Let's just stop that for now. And that's it. So there's no extra effort involved in doing the build. And this is great because you can do this if your build only takes 5 seconds, which some do, 5-10 seconds, you can have this build every time you do a check-in. If your build takes longer, like ours unfortunately takes a little over an hour, what we do is we have this build automatically at night, so we always have artifacts in the morning, and if a developer wants to, they can always come here and kick off a build themselves. So if I were to click this play button, it would start doing a build right now, which since it takes a while, I'm not going to do that. So, coming back to the presentation and where the cycle is, I think you can see that from start to finish, what we found here at Replicate is using the Atlassian products. We really have been very happy with it. I never set out to be a single vendor solution. I've used a lot of other things out there, and when we started, we were using a lot of other stuff too. But it really organically wound up for us that we started using Confluence, then Jira became natural. Then when I found Greenhopper, I feel all hell broke loose. It was such a great product. And then, of course, the CI server, something we've been doing since the beginning. And you can see how that really addresses each of the stages in this process. So I'd, overall, we've seen a huge performance improvement. We've, because of our use of Agile, been able to get out. We're on our 4th version of the product already. We've done that with a very small team in less than a year's worth of time. Everyone who comes by has been blown away at the quality of the product that we've developed, as well as the responsiveness. Our customers have really appreciated this because we've been in a situation where the customer says, hey, I really need X, I really need Y, and because we're on a 2-week cycle, and because we're trying to be responsive, we realize, hey, this is great. A month later, the customers got what they want, and they've just been, it's enabled us to get such a close relationship that we've just been much more successful than we would have otherwise been. So I got to say, I'm an arrogant guy. I have these things. If you're especially a startup, but even in a more established company, if you're not looking at agile processes, be it Scrum or XP or any of the other ones, you should seriously be questioning your job right now because it makes such a difference. And in particular, get through the process, understand what's involved, get some training or read more on the web, try it out with some paper, and then evaluate the best tools. And I think you'll find that, like we did, the Atlassian stuff just worked out really, really well. So that's my contact information, oren@teich.net. That's my personal contact information. Later on, you'll also see the contact information for my job. And if there's any questions, I'd love to take them.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Oren. That was an excellent presentation. It was a real whirlwind tour through exactly what Jira can do and a lot of our other tools as well in the Agile context. And definitely Greenhopper adds a lot to using Jira in Agile context. So I think that was a really good demo. So thanks very much, mate. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, there's a question box in the webinar software that we're using on the GoToWebinar box on the right-hand side. You can just chat questions in there if you have any questions. There is one question that has come through, which is, I'm not sure if you've had any experience or exposure yet, Oren, with the standard Jira whiteboard or the whiteboard plugin, which was released recently, and whether or not you've seen that and how that compares to Balsamiq.
I've seen it. We haven't implemented it, so I couldn't be the best comment. I guess off the top of my head, Atlassian guys, you'd probably be better. Is my understanding of Balsamiq is, or my understanding of the benefit of Balsamiq is Balsamiq has all these built-in widgets. So if you want a menu bar, you drag the menu bar. If you want a window frame, it has all this built-in stuff that makes it so easy versus having to draw with boxes, and that can get a little tedious.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I haven't used the whiteboard plugin myself, but I've seen the documentation on it, and that seems to be probably the biggest difference. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The whiteboard looks like it's just a basic whiteboard with simple drawing and simple tools, whereas Balsamiq is basically a mock-up tool for building applications and websites and things like that, and it has all those different components that you need to mock something like that up.
Right, and Balsamiq does have a free downloaded trial version available that you don't even need to put into Confluence. They have a standalone version, so try it. You can just go to the site, Balsamiq with a Q, BALSIMIQ, and if you just go to their site, his site, and download it, you can see it for yourself if you think it's worth it.
Yeah, excellent point. Just quickly, how big is the team that you're using this with?
Right, good question. So here at Replicate, we're 10 people total. This is the smallest team I've worked with in ages. Previously, when we've been doing this, my team's been anywhere from 50 people to 200 people, as I mentioned. But yeah, right now at Replicate, we're only 10 people.
Cool. Here's an interesting question, just around scale. How many projects? I guess we touched on the user question, but in terms of using Jira and Bamboo, how have you sort of seen that scale in its usage and adoption through across a number of projects and across a number of users?
Oh, it's so I can obviously only speak from my own personal experience. Despite, if you go around on the web and you search, like, for example, for Bamboo, it's kind of shocking to see how many open source projects and other people are using it right now. So the general adoption there is great. Internally, our adoption, 10 people, has been relatively easy. What I can say is that bigger companies I've been at in the past, like Sun, where we had 250 people, what I was finding is that we were using Confluence there, and we started to use Jira, and the adoption went like wildfire. So let me. I skipped on my philosophical viewpoint here. I realized one thing I need to talk about with tools, and this is as good a time as any. If you don't mind, take 5 minutes.
Yeah,
is,
sure.
If you look culturally at what's going on inside your organization, you have different organizations. You have marketing, product management, engineering, and everyone has their own goals and objectives. And there's one constant: you're always going to have a bug tracking database. That is. For better or for worse, I'm not even going to argue if it's the right thing or not, but you're always going to have a bug tracking database. It's just embedded in the culture of how engineering organizations work today. So you need to accept that fact. Whether you think that's good or bad, accept it. Now, you next need to ask yourself a question. If you're going to be trying, and understand, what is this bug tracking database? The bug tracking database is a de facto repository of customer requests. That is what a bug is. A bug is a customer telling you that they've found something they want changed. Now, sometimes, you can describe it as a bug or a feature in that perennial argument, but de facto, you have a database of customer requests. So now you need to decide, as an organization, as an executive, as a product manager, whatever, what do you want to do here? Do you want to implement parallel procedures? Do you want to leverage that existing thing? Now, my philosophy is, because you're always going to have this, because engineering will always have a bug tracking database, because it is the de facto repository of customer requests, if you're not building and using that, you're an idiot. You're doomed for failure. You're playing political games, you're trying to play power games, and any software you use that isn't tightly integrated with your bug tracking database is doomed for failure. So, and by the way, I say this from personal experience. I have bought almost every piece of software. I have tried everything. I hated bug tracking software and tried to do other things, and every time it failed, and I realized it's because at the end of the day, the engineers can't stop using their bug tracking database. And so when you introduce a new piece of software, what you're simply saying is it's another piece. You're not replacing, you're saying here's more. And so you're making everyone's job harder. So if you can integrate all this together, if you can get your bug tracking database integrated with your true customer requests and feedback, if you can truly get product management, marketing, and engineering on the same page, you have a huge leg up. And so from my perspective, that's the beauty of the Atlassian product suite, from basing this on Jira. Now, why am I bringing this up now? I'm bringing this all the way back to Sun. So at Sun, we have our own bug tracking database, Bugster. I don't work there anymore. We had this, and it's been grown over years. And any attempt to use any tool that didn't integrate with Bugster was doomed for failure, for the very reason I just said. The same thing happened at Monte Vista. We were using the Mozilla Foundation, Bugzilla. And again, anything that didn't integrate with that was doomed for failure. Once we recognize that, once we realize that it has to be built on the bug database, which is what we did here, which is what I started doing at Monte Vista, it made all the difference in the world. And so from an adoption perspective, if you're not fighting, if you're building on strength, if you're introducing a great bug tracking database, if you're going with a great process, if you're showing how the engineers are going to get value and not just more work, I've found that there's no obstacles whatsoever. It's something that they jump onto with both feet.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, especially that you've been at the extremely large end of town and now in a smaller team. There's another interesting question that we've got here from Van. He's sort of saying that his backlog has become really long, ridiculously long, as he says here, and he's just wondering if you're trying to organize the backlog, is there any way to sort of divide it up into
Yes. Yeah,
must-have, nice-to-haves?
Yeah. Can you share my screen again? I'll show you.
Yep. Jumping back to you now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had that very exact problem. So, okay, let's go to the planning board. So what I've done, hello.
Sure. Are you getting a black little box on your screen there?
That's this here, one sec.
Okay, yeah. That's it. Thanks.
Oh, sorry, sometimes it's a wireless network that I'm on, and it unfortunately has a tendency to be flaky. Okay, so this is a great question.
No problem.
This is the way I handle that, because I agree, ours is unruly as well. This interface you can see here with this list, once you get more than 300 items, 200 items on the backlog, it's miserable. So what we do is we actually have two backlogs. So here, if you look at the versions we've got, you can see I have a backlog called unscheduled and I have a backlog called backlog. And the way this works is the backlog is the true backlog. Okay, and if I click on the backlog, we can see here we only have 64 issues on the backlog. So it's much more manageable. And this is truly prioritized from top to bottom. This is where we pull everything from. This is where we do all of our work from. And I spend a lot of time making sure this backlog is correct. Now, obviously stuff's coming in all the time, customers are making requests, there's changes and everything. So what we have is I have like a secondary, which I call unscheduled. So this is where everything comes in. And you can see right now I have 240 issues on this, and sometimes it's even more. So this is where I put everything. And there is a lot of stuff here. And this is roughly prioritized, but frankly, it's no great thing. What I then do is on a periodic basis, once a week, and by the way, don't think that this removes the need for product management. Product owner is a critical role in Scrum, and this is the kind of stuff product owner needs to do. This is a full-time job, interfacing with customers and organizing your backlog, and interfacing with engineering. So I come through here and I will find out, oh, you know what, based on what we heard, this is now much higher priority. And either I'll move it up to the top of here, or more likely, if something really is top priority, I will move it from here into the backlog and then prioritize it just in the backlog. And so that way I never have to worry about ordering more than 70 items at once. I always try, and as we pull things off the backlog into iterations, I pull things out of the backlog. And then this unscheduled, it gets a little gnarly. And I'd say once every month or two, I do print out all of these, and I go through them with a pen and paper and just spend 2 hours in a quiet room by myself, making sure I didn't miss anything. Obviously, that's not ideal, but it's the best I've come up with. And this split between having this unscheduled and the backlog made all the difference in the world for me on that particular problem.
Yeah, that's excellent. Greenhopper does a really good job there, huh? There's a question here which is maybe something you can speak to, maybe it's something that you can't speak to, I don't know, but they're wondering, how could you apply some of these principles of Agile software development to just normal projects? Do you have any experience that you could speak to around that?
Yeah, it all depends on what you mean, of course, by normal projects, but let's assume you mean, as an example, so in my role, I have responsibility for our marketing efforts as well. So we, where is it? Galaxy marketing. So we actually do the exact same thing. So you'll notice here on my screen, I actually just changed the marketing project, and we're even using the same tool. So you can see here, as an RT employee, I have a presentation that communicates the company overview. Well, what's that? I just want the company pitch. So we created a user story for that, and then we're doing bi-weekly iterations within our team of marketing where we say, okay, what user story do we want to do? We just finished up some stuff, so nothing's showing up here. When you release things, they disappear. So we can then drag these in, say, okay, well, in order to do this presentation, I'm going to need to engage with the consulting company to get some graphics. We're going to need to get the copy done. We're going to need to have a review process. These are the steps. And here are the people who are doing it. And then once a day, we have a marketing scrum where we say, hey, how are things going? Who's done what? Where do things stand? And all the same things apply. Now, obviously, I don't have a CI server. I don't have a build server. I'm not using Bamboo to build my presentations yet, hopefully. But other than that, it's the exact same concept. And this can work for anything. This can work for any kind of project management. The basic concept is identify chunks, break those chunks into tasks, put the tasks into release, meet every day to talk about how it's going, and just iterate, and recognize that, maybe, for example, maybe we say this presentation is actually going to take more than 4 weeks to put together. And so what I really need to do is I need to break that user story, and that's too big, which is called an epic, by the way. If you have a user story that's really large, it's an epic, and you need to break it into smaller user stories. So we say, okay, instead of this, what I'm going to do first is, as RT employee, I have a messaging sheet that gets across the top messages. And a separate one is, I, as an RT employee, I have key graphics that can be used. And the third one I have, as an RT employee, I've pulled together available information to create a presentation. So then you've split what was too big to get done into a 2 week iteration into three different things, one per 2 week iteration.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really interesting to see. And that also makes me just wonder, these are the areas of the business that you're looking after, and you've got experience with Agile. You know the concepts really, really well, and you've been able to apply them over quite a few years and see the benefits yourself. Have any other members of the management team or other areas of the business seen the benefits of Agile and tried to apply them to their areas as well?
Yeah,
with
yeah,
or without
absolutely.
the tools?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those things where my company right now replicates so small with 10 of us that there's no other areas of the business. But at Monte Vista, for example, which is where I first 3 years ago started doing Agile, we had one project that one of the people working for me kicked off in Agile, and it naturally, organically grew. It was one of those, holy cow, that was successful. And so another department said, oh, well, we're going to try this ourselves, and another department did. There's that gets into the whole question of, especially when you're in established companies, what's the best process for Agile adoption, and how do you, because so much of Agile is mindset. I only barely skimmed the surface. There's so much here. There's hours of conversation. If you're really just getting involved in Agile and Scrum, this isn't something you can just jump into, because there's a lot of training you need to do. There's a lot of buy-in, and so there's always a question of change management in any company, and how do you propagate changes to the company. And so what I'd say is there's a lot of discussion on the internet about that. A lot of people with experience. It's something that, if you're interested, I'm more than happy to talk to you in more detail about offline, or just do a search. Like, for example, Mountain Goat Software I was talking about, they do training on this, and a bunch of other people do as well. So you can really see about, if you're in a bigger organization, because there's all different approaches, right? You can do the toe in the water approach, where you have a single group, which has the benefit of having the lowest risk, but also has the con of having the lowest benefit. You get the least bang for your buck that way. It takes the longest. Other companies have actually gone whole hog and completely top-down implemented it, which can work, but is extremely difficult. There's numerous cases of companies trying to adopt Agile and failing because they didn't understand the critical pieces. Agile is not, you can't just pick and choose. A lot of the time, you can't just say, ooh, I want to have a Scrum, but I'm still going to have specs and PRDs. So you need to understand the process. But yes, I've back to the original question, yeah, a lot of times I've seen one group say, wow, that worked great, let's adopt it ourselves, and it's grown organically that way.
Excellent. Someone here was curious as to, if you're interested in this tool set, how do you go about trying to convince others that, this is the right tool set to adopt, and that, you're going to get a return on your investment? I mean, probably, I guess, in the company you're at now, you could make the decision yourself based on your experience, but if you're trying to convince others that don't necessarily know what you know, how do you sort of sell that story?
Right, and I'd say, so spectrum to everything. My response to that would be, it depends on your company. And it depends on what you're trying to convince. So first off, are you trying to convince people to go Agile, or are you trying to convince people, or are you already Agile and you're trying to convince them of the right tool usage? Two different things you need to do there. Like I said, they're totally separate. The tools and the process are separate. Assuming you've already convinced people to go Agile, assuming you've been doing it for a little while and you're now looking at tools, then you have to ask, well, what kind of company are you in? What's the general successful evaluation process been? Do you need to go through a full RFP? Do you need to look at all of the different providers out there? Do you need to do a demo installation of all? Because, by the way, everyone has free versions of the software available. So it's an opportunity cost on your side about what you can do evaluations for. What do you trust? What's out there? So is that, do you need to go that full heavyweight? Or is your is your research sufficient? What's it going to take to get buy-in from your team? Because that's what you really need. Do you need to show off? Do you need to do a trial? Do you need to have everyone being able to play with it? Do you need to? At one company I was at, we identified a tiger team. There were 4 people, one from each functional domain. We sent them off for a month. They evaluated the different software. They identified the top 3 candidates. They installed the top 3 candidates. They did trial runs through all of them. They wrote up their things. They presented it before a board. You can go as heavyweight as that, or you can go and just do research on the internet, read what people are blogging about. I've certainly, if you go to my personal blog, I've certainly done comparisons of all the different tools out there. So there's no one size fits all. And this is a standard change management question, and you need to say, what is it going to take to get buy-in from my organization? What's the minimum amount I can do to get buy-in? And then target what you're going to need to do for your organization.
Awesome. Great answer. There's also, there was a question about tools that we covered, so I'll just try to quickly recap that for us, which was we saw Jira with the Greenhopper plugin. We saw Confluence with the Balsamic plugin, and the continuous integration tool that was doing the testing and success of the tests, or reporting on that, I should say, was Bamboo. So just to make sure that's clear. But thanks to everyone. That's all of our questions. So, Oren, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Oh, my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
And I really appreciate it. You definitely know what you're talking about. So it's great information for myself and for, no doubt, a lot of the people who tuned in today. So if you do have any other questions and want to reach out to either myself or to Oren in particular, Oren's email address is now on the screen, Oren Teich at replicatetech.com. My email is there as well, ben@atlassian.com. And this presentation will be archived online at atlassian.com/TV. Just for those that are tuned in, just to let you know what's coming up next, apart from the previous webinars that we have archived on Atlassian TV, this month, on the 23rd of April, we have a Plugin of the Month webinar with David Peterson from Customware. We also have, on the 14th of May, our next Voice of the Customer series webinar with Jeff Schilling from S1 Enterprise, talking about sort of an Agile-related topic as well in terms of the Scrum process. So if you can tune in, we'd love to see you guys there. And as well, for those who may not have seen it yet, we have our first ever summit coming up, Atlassian Summit, May 31 to June 2nd. This is the first ever conference that we've held, so we're getting pretty excited about it ourselves. The thing to note as well, if anyone's interested in coming along and learning more about our products and hearing from a lot of other customers' stories as well, with all of our products, there'll be different tracks for each of our products there. There is an early bird offer up until April 20, as you can see on the screen there. But the best thing to do is just to check out the Summit website to see the full detailed agenda. We've been spending a lot of time and energy trying to make the agenda something really valuable and not just a place to come and sort of go yay about Atlassian, but instead to really learn something, and we're trying to deliver as much value as we can and make it as compelling as we can. And there's been a lot of meetings held here just trying to really nail this down. So hopefully it'll be something that'll be of real value to a lot of people. So I recommend you checking it out and seeing if there's something of interest to you. And with that, thanks so much. And we're right on the hour, so I really appreciate your time. And Oren, thanks again. Bye, everyone.